The St. Timothy's mission was established when the bishop of the time appointed a priest to be the not incumbent, not rector, just simply to be at that point in time a pastor of the Anglican community in Agincourt. That there was an Anglican community in Agincourt at the time is the result of the fact that students from Wycliffe College had come out to this rural country village to walk around the streets of the village, to go out to the farms, to talk to people, and to hold worship services and prayer meetings and study groups in the homes. The community decided that they could come together in 1911, and they began meeting in a community hall over on what is now Brimley Road. They decided shortly afterwards that they needed a building of their own, and fortunately there was a former bank building on what is now Midland Avenue, just south of Shepherd, which was available for them to purchase, and that became St. Timothy's Mission Hall. Then they decided that in 1918, it took them 7 years, in 1918 they decided that they would build a church of their own. And they bought property on the south side of Main Street, what is now Shepherd Avenue. And in 1919-20, they had a church built. That church is now the rear 2/3 of the nave plus the tower. You must remember that Agincourt was still a country village in 1911 and continued that way up until after the Second World War. But after 1945, people began to build houses around in the community. And in the 1950s, there were a number of subdivisions built. And of course, that meant that people were coming and looking for a church. St. Timothy's had never had a priest of its own. In fact, the priest who was responsible for the community, the Anglican community in this parish, served, depending on the need, St. Jude's Wexford or St. Paul's Lamoureux, in addition to St. Timothy's. 2 or 3 points, in other words. And it was only in 1953, as growth began to come to the community, that a priest was appointed on a full-time basis for St. Timothy's. And that, of course, has been the case since. The church began to grow, of course, with this growth, with this number of people coming into the community. And the parish decided that it needed to expand its building. In the 1950s, there was an addition put on to the east end of the old church. They simply extended the nave and built transepts and a chancel, and then in the corners of the chancel and the transept, they put offices. Again, in the 1980s, with the growth that came, the church added a west wing with the Walker Hall in the basement, the bonus room upstairs, and with new offices. The 1980s were a great high point for St. Timothy's. Attendance on a Sunday in the early 1980s ballooned up to about 300. Growth stabilized in Agincourt in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And at that point, the community began to change. People from different backgrounds, different religious backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds started to come into the community. And the parish reflected that in its membership. The membership became increasingly a mixed ethnic background congregation. But I think that the parish needs to remember its original roots, that it started out as a mission, and that we need to think in terms of mission and we need to think in terms of reaching out to the community for our future.